Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that is always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value at a time in history when most people have more on their plates than any one human should. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. Some words people have used to describe me range from speaker, trainer, coach, healer, writer, spiritual advisor, teacher, podcaster, and someone even called me their soul Sherpa once. I'm less concerned with titles or labels and more interested in results, change, and creating a world we want to, can, and are proud to live in. A kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths. They trust in themselves, in life, and recognize that we need each other. And they know how to cultivate healthy relationships to true power, not the very unhealthy kind of power our current culture is predicated upon. Speaking of our culture, there's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth D'Alto. You can expect a wide range of topics when you tune into this show. Everything from health, communication, money, success, parenting, desire, sex, love, and spirituality, to making pivots and transitions in life, and topics related to psychology, storytelling, gender and race issues, emotional intelligence, activism, advocacy, and much more. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating and review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here with me. Here we go. This is episode number 256 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, and I'm here today with Amy Ahlers. We're talking about self-bullying and the big fat lies that women tell themselves. Amy is a two-time author and a total spitfire. Our conversation was supercharged, and we explored a lot of things that are up in our culture, our lives, and the climate of the coaching industry right now. Amy's truth was around celebrating the truths and paradoxes of life and embracing both the magical and the messy. And I know that might sound a little bit airy-fairy, but this conversation was anything but airy-fairy. We got into white fragility and privilege and the problem with colorblindness, how we've been unpacking these things in our own lives and businesses, her core work around the inner mean girl and when that shows up. We talked about big fat lies that women tell themselves, the antidote to self-bullying, being a mom to girls and how to navigate objectification, as well as how your social media behavior reflects your values. This is a deep and juicy conversation. Have a listen, probably more than once. Share this, enjoy this one. Again, it's episode number 256, so you can catch anything we talked about in the episode on the show notes page at untameyourself.com/TT-256. That's T as in truth, T as in telling -256. I'm so excited to hear from you all. Find me on Instagram, find me on the post, leave me comments, send me notes, let me know what you thought, and let's get into it. Amy Ahlers, welcome to Truth Telling.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm so glad to be here. I love me a good truth-telling session. Let's get in there.
Everyone listening, I've been hearing about Amy for many, many years, and I met her recently at an event for speakers that we went to up in Oakland when I fell in love with Oakland. She's lucky enough to live there back in February. And so Amy's great. She might be louder than me, so you all might need to turn down the volume a little bit.
We'll see. I don't know. Two wild women on truth telling. Hold on. Hang on to your hats. It's going to be a wild ride.
You've been officially warned. So, Amy, what's a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
You know, so you're catching me on a really interesting day. I'm going to share something super vulnerable and personal. My youngest daughter, Evie Rose, who is 4 years old, she just turned 4. She had to get an MRI yesterday. And it was really, really intense. Anyway, it's a whole long story, but she ended up having an MRI to determine if she had something going on her spine. They wanted to sedate her. I spoke my truth and said, no, we're not going to sedate her, because normally for 4-year-olds, they're like, they can't stay still that long, blah, blah, blah. And then the physician's assistant was like, I think maybe she could do it. I was like, I really feel like she can do this. I really do, just because of the kind of kid. I actually wouldn't feel that way with my oldest. So it wasn't like, my kid's amazing. It was like, actually, I think that she has the disposition. So I went in yesterday. We had to wait an hour. They were totally backed up, which sucked, especially with a 4-year-old. She did amazing. She laid, like, they had to redo 2 parts of the picture and laid in that darn MRI machine for 40 minutes, which like lying still, which for even adults is really hard. And the truth is, I just got the results back and she's 100% fine and normal. And there's nothing else that needs to be done. Because there was a chance that she might have to have a surgery, like all this stuff. So I'm just like bathing in the truth of that she's healthy, that she's normal, that she's okay. And then, of course, where I go, just being who I am, I go to all the parents, the aunties, the grandparents that got the bad news, And so the truth of life and the paradox of life, and that sometimes I always say the messy and the magical. And it's like, we got the magical one on this, roll of the dice. And sometimes you don't get that one. Sometimes you get the messy side. And so the truth, like, how do we live with that paradox, Elizabeth? I don't know, but it's there. And it's a big truth, and it's something that's rippling through my life all the time.
Rippling through all of our lives all the time. Thank you for coming out hot with the paradox, because I see this online right now. You and I are in the coaching industry as much as I try to not be in the coaching industry, I'm in the freaking coaching industry.
Yeah. Face it. Face the facts, lady.
Face the facts. Our mutual friend Amanda Steinberg said to me recently, like, you're in an industry that you're repulsed by, and I'm like, yes. Right. And that comes to what you just said, right? The magical and the messy. So I'm not here to just like straight shit talk the coaching industry. There's a lot of stuff that I'm not into, but there's so much that's great and beautiful and helpful. So much that isn't. But we're seeing this. So if people listen to this podcast, the likelihood that they are aware that a coaching industry exists is high. Or that they follow other people, or they listen to other people's messages and stuff like that. So you might be seeing some stuff online right now about things that are going on with certain people getting called out, people getting called in. There's so much conversation right now about privilege and racism and oppression and marginalization and white supremacy and all. Like, there's so much tension, in the United States alone right now. And I know we have many international listeners, and you have your own stuff on your own homelands, but there's so much tension.
It's so true. And as a white spiritual woman and a coach and someone who's been in the coaching industry now for 18 years, it is a really interesting time to watch the shitstorm and to really watch. It's like, I feel like being a white woman of privilege, it's like, okay, so let's put this in our face. And I did a race relations series on my podcast a couple years back, maybe a year and a half ago. And it was so interesting, Elizabeth, because I was sitting there doing these interviews and asking these questions and talking about white privilege. I lost a ton of listeners during that time because, of course, people didn't want to talk about it. I know you know. And I also started really educating myself about these issues the best I can. And I've cracked the surface. I'm very well aware. I've cracked the surface of it, right? And it was so interesting because I remember I would lay awake at night after an interview, before an interview, so afraid that I said the wrong thing, that I did the wrong thing, right? And I was like, this is white fragility 101 right here. I am living it all the time. And so to all of my fellow women that look like me, that have skin color like me, that are in this industry, it's, this is the fragility that people are talking about. This is the thing where you don't want to read that article, or you can't read that article, or you can't face it. And that's what privilege is that I can turn it off. But a lot of people of color feel like they cannot turn it off. And so that right there is such It's such a huge thing. And until we gain more resiliency and gain more strength and speak out even when we're going to get it wrong, that is where we will build the strength to have courageous conversations about race, about privilege, about all of it.
Yeah.
And, and none of us are above being called out, myself included, even when we are educating ourselves. I know I'm going to screw up all the freaking time. And I'd still rather speak out because it's important to me and get it wrong than not speak out at all.
When part of the rebranding of this podcast that we did earlier in the year was because, much like you're saying, I started having these conversations on the show. I'd been having them behind closed doors and educating myself, but then I decided part of something I could do. There's so little that white women or white passing women or people of privilege can actually do for those who have less. But advocating and using our voices and using our platforms so that other people can become aware, because part of the harm is done because people just don't know. They don't know they have implicit biases. They don't know that privilege is a thing. They instantly get defensive. They don't want to hear it. They feel like people are trying to take away their merits, and it's not that. It's just that this shit is real. And I want to say, when Amy and we giggled there for a moment, we were giggling about the losing half our listeners. Or you said you lost a ton of listeners. I lost half.
Did you really?
Yeah. And listen, it happened around the same time that Lisbon, our host, also started reporting stats differently. So maybe it wasn't half.
Okay.
But if it wasn't half, it was at least a quarter or a third or something like that.
Yep.
And I'm okay with it, because even now, right, if people are feeling uncomfortable, we have to look at why we're uncomfortable. What you said is so helpful, right? Privilege is that we can look away. We can turn it off. And you also said something that I just want to come back to for a moment, because you said people of color, and it's not just people of color, it's people in any marginalized group feel like they can't turn it off. And I kind of want to nuance that, not to correct you, but just throw out there that some people just can't. Someone can't walk out of their house and have darker skin. Someone can't walk out of their house and not have a disability. Some people aren't walking out of their house. They're 100%. Having other experiences. And so, we're all going to mess it up. None of us are perfect. And this is something that's been up for me a lot lately. We're all racist.
Totally.
To say I'm not is a lie. I might have unpacked a lot of it. I might have more awareness. I might be making choices to not act on my internalized racism, but I have it. We all have it.
Absolutely. Well, right. And it's I feel like I grew up in a generation where you were supposed to be colorblind. Right. So, which is one of the most harmful things that I feel like we did around race in my particular generation. It's I don't know what the fuck, excuse my language, but what that was about. But it's so crazy. So then to really come to terms with our own racism, our own conscious and unconscious bias, whether it's about people with disabilities, like you said, or people who, gender identify differently than you do, or whatever it is, it's for you to then confront that really fucks with your image of yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's it just goes right here into your face. And that's what I realized because I had been reading these articles on white fragility, and I was I don't know. And then some people are that doesn't exist, that. Blah, blah. And then I was oh, wait, this is what they're talking about. And that I cannot sleep because I'm afraid I said the wrong thing. And it's I am so fragile. I'm so breakable about these conversations, and I'm getting better. I'm getting more resilient, and it's still totally there. And that's part of it. That's part of racism. So I totally agree with you.
And I think, to my understanding, the root of the fragility is making it about yourself, right?
Right.
If you can't sleep at night because you're worried about what you said the wrong thing, rather than you can't sleep at night because there's a lot of people in this country who are in all kinds of danger that we're never going to know or experience or understand.
Right.
So.
Right. Yes. And I think that it is part of, I agree with you that that's part of it. And then I also just think in general, people just can't have the conversation. They're too fragile to have the conversation.
Yeah.
And so then they don't say anything, and then it becomes something that is not talked about. Yeah. But we're living in a time where, time's up in more ways than one.
And what you said, the breakability, right? I had to, this was actually a thing that happened, there are all these different conversations happening online, but I realized last week on Facebook, I'm doing my work in my own way. I'm having these conversations offline. I'm doing all kinds of stuff. I don't say that to pat myself on the back. I say it to justify my choice to not be doing it primarily on Facebook. because I was watching people falling apart.
Yes.
And like, you know what? I don't need to be, there's such better uses of my time. If I really care about this issue and these issues, there's such better uses of my time where I could be helping or having an impact than reading other people's friggin' meltdowns. So that was a big, like, I had to discern that. Like, I had to like put my foot down with myself last week and be like, this is indulgent. I'm literally indulging in drama. I might as well just like go watch TV.
Yeah. Yeah.
At least it'll be entertaining and not like just so unhelpful. So
exactly.
we started out in this vein, and I actually appreciate it because it's not your area of expertise. I want to be clear about that. Amy's not an expert on this stuff. I'm not an expert on this stuff. She's a white woman. I am a mixed race woman with white passing privilege. We are unpacking these things, and what you just listened to was us have a conversation about unpacking these things. We are not experts. Don't inbox us asking us to teach you anything because we're not the people to teach you. And I want to be clear about that because I have been getting inbox because I have these conversations. People will message me and they'll be like, hey, can you help me with that? And I'll be like, I'm not the one. I'm not the right person to ask. Like, go to a race educator. Go to, like, we're going to be having more of those people on the show, by the way. We'll have people in programs or recommendations and resources and stuff like that.
Awesome.
But it's not us.
Awesome.
I just want to like really emphasize that point. We're talking about it, but we are not the ones.
Yes.
So what Amy's work is around this inner mean girl, is around self-bullying. I don't love that it exists, but I love the term self-bullying because I think it encapsulates so much of how people treat themselves. And I'm excited to dive into it because I'll share with you that this is not something I dealt with for many years. I'm kind to myself. And in the wake of the last, I will say 2 years of coming out of a really intense relationship, as well as just recently in the last couple of months, getting back into dating. As well as deconstructing and reconstructing my entire business over the last year, 9 months or something like that, I realized, damn, I was shit-talking myself more than I have in many, maybe potentially ever, and I was shocked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the perfect stew, the perfect recipe that you put together of changing relationship status, taking your business to the next level and your message to the next level, dating, like all of that, like what a recipe of risk. And what I know to be true is the moment we are risking, the moment we are growing, we can count on our inner mean girls to be right there with a megaphone. We can count on the self-bullying to show up in droves. That's like the prime time when we're quote unquote outside our comfort zone. But it's the truth. That's when they show up the most.
So how did you get into this work? What made you start that? I don't usually ask people these questions, but I want the origin story on this.
Yeah. Well, I've been a coach now, as we said, for 18 years. I started out with just a life coaching practice, got into doing some corporate work. And the thing that really knocked my socks off was, when I first started, I was a coach in LA. And I was, coaching a lot of people for very little money. I was working, a huge part of my community at that time were artists, actors, musicians, people in the arts that didn't necessarily have a lot of money. So the external circumstances weren't great. And they would have this internal world where they were beating themselves up and being really hard on themselves. And then as my coaching practice grew, I started working in the corporate sector, also started working with people like lawyers and VPs and people that had a lot of money, like the external looked really together. And guess what? It was the same freaking conversation that was going on behind the scenes. And I realized that no matter how successful or beautiful or rich or thin a woman is, on some level, she's being way too hard on herself. And I noticed this particular self-bullying thing being so hardcore, in particular with women. Yeah. And so I became really fascinated with that. And that led me to write my first book, Big Fat Lies Women Tell Themselves, because I realized we were buying all of this BS, all of these big fat lies of our inner mean girl and thinking that that was the truth about us. And so it really naturally evolved from there. It became that through line that I got really, really interested in investigating.
What are some of the big fat lies?
Number one, I'll tell you, in my first book, Big Fat Lies Women Tell Themselves, I'm just pulling it off the shelf here. So it's divided up in different sections, but the mother load, as I like to call it, Big Fat Lie number one is I am not enough.
Yeah.
Right? Mother load. I am a total fraud. Right? Mother load. The mother load.
I'm laughing. I just love you. I love the way you talk and express yourself. You're like, mother load. It's great. It is.
It's true.
No one can accuse you of lacking passion. That's for damn sure.
This is true. I know.
Keep going.
Yes. So, I don't belong. I have to be perfect. It's too late for me. I don't measure up. Like all of those things. I feel like we all have kind of one of those major mother load, like sucker punch when you're not looking that her inner mean girl gives us.
Yeah.
And that's the one that can sometimes be running the show in our lives. Because the thing is that with our inner mean girls is that she's going to find that big fat lie and then she's going to collect evidence to prove that it's the truth.
Yeah. What's yours? What's your mother load?
It's interesting. So for a long time it was I'm a failure.
Oh.
Like I'm failing. Like I felt like I was just failing. Then I kind of cleared that one out. And then when I became a mom, it became all about worry. Like if I'm like worrying about my kids means I'm loving them.
Oh.
Huge big fat lies for moms. Like I hate that expression. Well, a mother's job is to worry. I'm like, actually, no, it's not. A mother's job is to love her children. It is not to worry about them. Totally different sides of the spectrum. One's about fear, one's about love. And so I hate that. And then I would say, all of the body image stuff, like I'm too fat, thin, short, tall, all of those ones, of course, most women have it. Something that your inner mean girl's plaguing you with. So those are some of my personal ones.
Mine is too much.
Oh, yeah.
Shocker. People who listen know I've probably talked about that before. And then, what's really interesting? I won't say never. I was always fit and athletic, and I was a personal trainer, and I was in great shape from the time I was a kid. My body started developing when I was young. So for the most part, for lack of a better way to describe it, I'm just going to use the blanket statement that I was always pretty hot.
Nice.
Yeah. And then I moved to California.
Uh-huh.
I left the personal training industry. I gained like 25, 30 pounds. And I found myself in a relationship with a person who was criticizing my body often. But then what's really interesting, even after that, I moved out of that. Like, I love my body now. This is my work. I do Wild Soul Movement. I moved to Los Angeles. And I started dating. And I was like concerned. I was like, is anyone going to think I'm attractive here?
Right. Yeah. No, I feel you. I moved to Los Angeles when I was 21 years old, right out of college. And I moved there and I quickly understood that basically the Los Angeles pool, especially of women in their 20s, is of the prettiest girl in every town in America. Just moved there.
By the way,
I had that ego blast very early on in my 20s of like, just you're not going to be considered hot here in LA.
Well,
so.
and again, I want to acknowledge that we're saying hot.
Yeah.
People are listening, and if people are watching on YouTube, they can see me doing the air quotes. This is a mythical norm. This is a cultural standard. This is like by the standard that we currently have of like Victoria's Secret model, right? This isn't 100%. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Every body is beautiful in its own way, and we don't say that to just like blanket include people. I say it because it's true. Yeah. But what I think is so interesting is, so I started dating, and I was dying. This was just like recently that I saw this in someone's profile. This man, you know how many men are jaded in LA dating? You could read it in their profiles. This guy wrote, "I'm so tired of women that are drop dead gorgeous on the outside and absolute garbage on the inside." I was like, oh my God.
Wait, so are you going on a date with him? Because he sounds like a truth teller. I mean, Elizabeth, you might have found your man. What are you doing? Are you dating him? Come on. Seriously.
No, I swiped left on that guy. But this comes to two things. I've always, people probably get tired of hearing me bring up compassion. But I think, people talk about everything's about love, serve love, serve love. But compassion is a piece of love that is it's hard to cultivate if people aren't aware that they're not like, it's as deeply as important it is. And so, even reading that, it was just, it's funny the way the guy put it, but it's like, why are people, quote, garbage on the inside? Or another thing that I wrote, someone's profile legitimately said, my last date showed up drunk and threw up. Why are people doing things like that? It's not because they feel great about themselves. They probably have some kind of self-bullying situation. It's a jungle out there, Amy.
Oh my God, it's a jungle.
Friggin' jungle.
Shit. That's terrible. Can you imagine? Oh, I have a date tonight. I know I'm going to get wasted and then puke on my first date. Like, what is happening?
What's happening? And I don't know I don't know this girl. I don't know anything about her. I'm not going to judge her, but like,
of course,
it doesn't sound like things are going okay. So come back to the self-bullying. I want to know, because I'm sure, I know you gave me your book. I'm not going to pretend I read it.
Oh God, honey, of course.
Amazon listen and read list, decades long. I'll never catch up at this point. But
you're cracking me up right now.
I'm having so much fun.
Oh my God, your listeners must love you. Do you love this woman or what, everyone? Oh my gosh, you're cracking me up.
I get great messages on Instagram, yes. But what role does compassion play in this unbullying ourselves?
Yes. I mean, compassion is so deeply important, and it's really the antidote to self-bullying, because self-compassion in particular, and by the way, here's what I want to say about that. I always say inner mean girls left unchecked turn into outer mean girls.
I'm going to write that down and we're going to come back to it.
Yeah. So it's so important. This is why when I see someone that's being mean in the world, mean at the workplace, mean, on the playground, even at school or in the halls of junior high or whatever, I always feel so much compassion for that person, because I know from working with so many different clients from around the world that if someone is being that cruel and mean to other people, she is being a nightmare to herself.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, even thinking about your ex-boyfriend who you brought up, who was unkind to you about your body or what have you. I can only imagine what was going on for him about his own body image, or about whatever that was tearing himself down. Hurt people. You've heard that expression before, and it's so true. So for you, and compassion is such a key element, because when we have compassion for ourselves, and when it's unconditional compassion, meaning there are no conditions with which we apply that compassion. So it's like, maybe you can be compassionate with yourself when you get the raise, or when you go out on a great date, or when you whatever it is. But then do you find the compassion for yourself when you royally screw up, when you make a mistake, when you don't get that job interview that you went on, when you swipe right and someone else swipes left? I don't know which way it's supposed to go, but you get like,
Amy's like, I've been married for a very long time. I don't know how this swiping works.
For 18 years. Yeah. So, so it's like, in those moments when you fail, that's the moment when you need the compassion. And so often that's the moment when we turn on ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I am just such a huge stand for women in particular to stop turning on themselves, to stop underestimating themselves, to stop objectifying themselves, to stop bullying themselves, and to start, and compassion, such a huge element. And I'll say, when we can be compassionate with ourselves, it fills our cup up enough that we can have compassion for other people too.
100%. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to know, I just wrote down a couple of the things that you said because I didn't want to lose my train of thought. I want to know a little more specifically about how we objectify ourselves.
Yeah. I did this great interview on my podcast with this gal named Bree Mathers, who has a book called Love the Skin You're In. And I was specifically interviewing her because my podcast is now the Amy Ahlers Show. Much like you, I rebranded it, but it was for 2 years, the Mama Truth Show. And so I was talking specifically about girls and what girls are doing to their bodies. Mm-hmm. And self-objectifying ourselves is when we start treating our own body as an object. It's when we start saying, words like we were saying hot in quotes, right?
Yeah.
So it's like we start going, okay, my boobs are supposed to look this way. My boob, like when we're not actually treating our bodies like the temples they are, our bodies, like these breathing, blood pumping, moving through time, air, and space machines that are amazing, that are getting, if you're listening right now, you can hear with your ears, you're breathing, your blood is pumping through your body, like all of those things. And it's this magical, amazing, wonderland, so to speak, of incredible mystery and magic. And yet we will reduce it down to, I don't like my thighs, or reduce it down to my stomach's supposed to be flatter, or my boobs are supposed to be bigger or smaller or whatever. And that starts at actually a really young age for girls in particular, because we're getting those messages from media all the time that our bodies are not enough, that our bodies are supposed to look like the Victoria's Secret model, as you said.
Yeah.
Which oftentimes is a prepubescent girl. I mean, it's insane.
This is an amazing point. Before we got online, you were telling me how your older daughter recently got a haircut like Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things. And how old is she? Is she like 11 or is she 13?
10 and a half. Yeah, fifth grade.
Not your daughter, the actress.
Oh.
I think she's 13, right?
I think she's a little older than that now. She might be like 14 or 15 now, but I think since the last taping, she's probably a couple years ago,
Either way, she's not legal.
Yeah.
And I follow her on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I also follow the little girl from Blackish. Marseille, I think is her name.
Yeah.
And I feel constricted every time I scroll past a picture of them, and they are like, it's a red carpet look, just like the same way it would be for an adult woman.
I know.
And I'm wondering, like, they have all the makeup, and they have all, like, I just remember, like, when my parents wouldn't let me wear makeup, right. It's so, and again, it's not a judgment. I'm always just so curious, like, how is this impacting these younger girls right now? So the self-objectifying, and you're right. I had an experience when I was very young. I was in, like, 7th grade. I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast before, where all of our guy friends got together and ranked all of our girlfriends by body part, basically. It was by face, boobs, butt, legs, everything. And then, like, personality was in there. And I remember because I had a girlfriend who was beautiful. Like, all the boys were in love with her. And so when we caught wind that this thing had happened, we were all like, oh, of course, like, so-and-so must have won. But she didn't, quote, win. I won.
Oh.
And I just will never forget feeling conflicted. Simultaneously, like, this, like, confident boost, proud of myself. But also, like, there was something gross about being broken down by category.
Yeah.
And that happened when I was like 12 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, and then it's like we do that to ourselves.
Yeah.
We think, well, okay, I love my butt, but I really am supposed to have bigger boobs to balance out my butt, or whatever it is. Like for me, after breastfeeding 2 kids, I'm like, okay, where do I sign up for the breast reduction? This is insane. Like the girls are huge, Yeah. So there's so there's this way, the grass is always greener on the other side. It's like, you're supposed to, it's the standards. Like I always love the Cindy Crawford quote. I don't even look like Cindy Crawford.
Yeah.
She really is acknowledging the airbrushing, like all of the crap that goes on, that we're comparing ourselves to these images that even the model herself doesn't live up to.
100%.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
And I could think back on like being young and not knowing that Photoshop or airbrushing was a thing, and just working out to get like that stomach or those arms. And there would be like a dimple or a line or something, and being like, damn, how much harder am I going to have to work?
Right. Yeah. And there's this interesting study. It's not just about body image where little girls do this. I thought this was really interesting. There's this study, I want to get the name right. Gender stereotypes about intellectual ability emerge early and influence children's interest. It's a mouthful. But basically what this study showed is that, there's such a lower amount of women in fields like philosophy and physics, which are supposedly for the brilliant people, right? The people that are really, really, really smart. And studies now show us that girls stop perceiving themselves and other girls as really, really smart by age 6. By age 6, girls are starting to underestimate their entire gender by saying, no, the boys are the ones that are really, really smart. The girls are smart, but they're not really, really smart.
I'm curious, what year was this study from?
It's actually really recent.
No way.
Yeah, it's really recent. I'm trying to see if I have the actual, I do on my slide where I talk about this in the corporate sector. I have the thing, but it was actually a recent study that I just came across within the last 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, my mind is blown right now. And, you know, I'm really glad you brought this up because this reminds me of something that was just like glaring after our last election, that a lot of people of privilege really thought that we were way further along as a culture than we actually are.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in that moment right now of being like, damn, for real? Because like I live in a bubble of women's empowerment and I was raised by smart women. My mom and her sisters are sharp.
Yep.
And so I've always felt like women are brilliant.
Yeah.
So that wasn't my experience. So this is kind of, it's blowing my mind and I'm bringing it up also just draw attention to how we're, again, implicit bias, right?
Yep. Totally. Exactly. Well, and I think that this is why, for me, I feel like one of the greatest things holding women back is self-bullying, is underestimating ourselves. And that's not to say that the external things are not real. They are real. Yeah. And I feel like one of the places that we can do our work and empower ourselves is about stopping underestimating ourselves, stopping objectifying ourselves, getting off the diet insanity cycle, getting out of saying, oh, that's not for me. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to run for politics. I'm like, if there has ever been a greater permission slip than having all of these unqualified people in the White House, which we have right now, politics aside, if you just look at the qualifications of people that are in a whole bunch of different offices in the US right now, it's like, there's a permission slip. Let's take this as a sign that you are ready. If you have an interest in running for local politics, if you have an interest in running for state or, Congress or president, let this be the permission slip time, because women, studies show over and over again, we predict we'll do worse on tests. We predict that we're not ready. We ask for salary negotiations 4 times less often than men do. And when we finally do go in and negotiate a salary, we ask for 30% less than men do. No wonder there's inequity in our pay.
Was it you that told me that women will only apply for a job if they know they're 100% qualified, but men will apply if they know they're 50% or something like that?
Yeah. I've heard that study. I don't think it was me that shared that with you, but yeah. It's true. It's crazy. It is crazy. We are taking ourselves out of the game all the time.
So would you say you would call underestimating ourselves as a form of self-bullying?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that then on top of that, so we tear ourselves down, we underestimate ourselves, we bully ourselves, and then we've created this culture for women where we tear each other down. And all of these incredible studies start showing us proof of that too. There's a study, Intolerance of Sexy Peers, something like that. And I can give you links to these studies, by the way. They're really interesting. But basically, if an attractive woman walks into the room, 85% of females in the room will do a once over and will say something to belittle that woman.
Wow.
Will basically tear her down. So you're supposed to be beautiful, but not too beautiful.
Yeah.
And then there's this Howard Heidi study that shows that when men are really successful, men and women both like them a lot and want to hang out with them on the weekends and think they're doing a great job. The only change in the story was the name Howard versus Heidi. Same story. And then students were asked to rate their perceptions. For the women, for the Heidi, the exact same story, exact same qualifications. She was perceived as being too political and very aggressive and that people didn't like her. So we as a society, we've created this culture where we're pitting ourselves against one another. Now, if you look at it from a brain science perspective, you can go back to, it wasn't all that long ago that we had to fight for a husband so that we could have land and be okay and have food, shelter, and clothing. We don't live in that time anymore, but we still have part of that reptilian brain inside of us. And it's time for us to rise above that and start really allowing other women to rise without tearing them down.
Many years ago, have you ever read any of the Mama Gina books?
Pussy, yeah.
I'm just going to say, I think her work is great and important and also problematic, and it's not my favorite. And I'm not saying that to talk crap. I'm more wary than ever on the show of when I mention something of being clear about whether or not I recommend it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend her work or not recommend it. What I'm saying is check it out if you're listening. And figure it out for yourself. But many years ago, I did read her book, School of the Womanly Arts. And that in that book was something that addressed what you're exactly talking about here. And I started looking at women differently. And I started going, if I feel jealous, what can I bless about this woman? If I think that woman is more attractive than me, great. I could appreciate her beauty instead of having to make it mean anything about me, right? Like someone can be a thing without it meaning anything about me personally, And that was really pivotal. And I'm sure you have tons of stuff like that in because we were talking about like, what are the problems? How do we bully ourselves? I want to get to what's the solution, but let me come back to this that I wrote down. Inner mean girls left unchecked turn into outer mean girls. I think intellectually we could all pick up on the concept. How does someone check themselves though? Because if you're unchecked, you might not know.
At Inner Mean Girl Reform School, we have 13 different inner mean girl archetypes that we've uncovered and discovered over the years. And some of them are very obvious archetypes, like the perfectionist, for example, obviously drives you to perfection, often associated with procrastination, right? Or the comparison queen is one of the archetypes. And the comparison queen has two sides. One side, which is more common, is that she compares your worst to everyone else's best, right? So you're scrolling through your Instagram or Facebook feed and you're like, wow, my life is like shit, because you're comparing someone's best moment to your worst moment. It's apples to oranges. It just doesn't make sense. So you feel really inferior. But the other side of that is you compare your best to someone else's worst so that you feel superior. And it's actually the same inner mean girl archetype. She can do either of those things to you and for you. So because oftentimes I'll have clients that will say, well, no, I think I'm awesome. I'm amazing. And, so-and-so just doesn't have their act together and blah, 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 blah. Like they're tearing other women down. They're tearing other people down. And then I say, actually, that's your inner mean girl doing that, because you know what? You don't have to compare yourself at all. You can appreciate someone else, be inspired by someone else, and actually not have that be how you build up your own quote unquote self-esteem. You're building it on a stack of cards. It's a house of cards. It's going to fall any moment. They think that's their inner wisdom, which is their voice of truth. And I'm like, that's not your inner wisdom. Your inner wisdom is not interested in what anybody else is doing. Your inner wisdom is interested in what's right for you and what works for you and what's in alignment for you. And so that comparison is so brutal for people. And so I really feel like the majority of people that turn into the mean girls, all that's about is their inner mean girl that's trying to make them feel superior so they can feel okay about themselves. And the cost when you have a comparison queen that is making you feel superior is you never have true intimacy or true friends. Mm-hmm. You always feel like you're seated at the far table, right? You never have that true deep sisterhood with other women, which is such a vital component to really creating goodness and satisfaction and fulfillment in your life. So when I've helped women really take that superior inner mean girl out of the driver's seat and put their inner wisdom, all of a sudden they get to have friendships. They're like one of those women that say, oh, I'm just I only have male friends. And it's like, why? Because you're tearing everybody down around you. Like no wonder women don't want to be around you. If you are a woman that's listening right now that has that just say, oh, I'm just a guy's gal. Like I just have guy friends. Seriously, take a look at your inner mean girl. See what she's saying to you about other women. And it's worth it. It's worth it to risk and to have sisterhood. There's nothing like it. I don't know what I'd do without my female friends.
I'm telling you, I've not taken because you have a quiz for that, right?
I do. I have an inner mean girl archetype quiz. Yes.
What's the link for that if people want to take it?
Yeah, freeinnermeangirlquiz.com, freeinnermeangirlquiz.com. And it's 39 questions, so it's not a super short survey. Like your survey wasn't super short either, right? Your self-test one. Yeah, I remember I did it. And it's so worth taking because it's important to know which you get ranked on all of the inner mean girls, which one's running the show, and then you get an instant deactivator tool to start working with that inner mean girl. Yeah.
I'm gonna take that because this rings true for me. That's how I used to be for sure. All the way up through my 20s was the superior one.
Yeah.
The tearing people down in a way. Totally.
Yeah.
I want to repeat something you said. Your inner wisdom is not interested in what anyone else is doing. Yeah. This goes back to the thing that I was saying in the beginning of realizing why Why am I indulging and engaging with the drama on Facebook around anything?
Right.
Why? Unless I'm learning. It's different if I'm like learning. So like something that at the time of recording this, the Donald Glover video, This Is America, came up. So I've been reading all the articles about that because it's fascinating to me how people are dissecting it like it's a painting and people are going, this means that means that. Like they're looking at the video, they're pulling apart the symbolism. Like that I'm fascinated by. I'm less fascinated by like any of the drama of like who wants to say whether it was good or bad. I'm not interested in the critique. I'm interested in the symbolism. So, and I invite people listening to really look at, this is a place. So now that it's 2018, social media is an absolute cesspool to trigger self-bullying. Can you talk about that?
Huge cesspool. Like I said, I mean, people on their like I love, I know I remember I shared this on my Instagram feed too, where it's like nobody's life looks as good as their Instagram feed.
Yeah.
And it's so true. And so you have to go in like if I'm under, I call it the inner mean girl attack. Like if I'm under inner mean girl attack, the worst thing that I can do is go to my phone and go onto a social media platform and think I'm going to feel better after looking at that. That is like,
even when I'm not under inner mean girl attack, I rarely feel better after looking at that.
Right? It's really interesting because I feel like, there's a couple things about social media I'll say. One is the reason that I feel like it has gotten so popular is because we all want to have a witness.
Yeah.
Lives. Like we want to be witnessed. We want to be acknowledged. We want to feel that sense of community and connection. But here's the thing. When you go on to any of the social media channels, are you getting that need filled? Are you feeling more connected? Are you feeling more witnessed and acknowledged for who you are? Those are normal human needs. Yeah. And I think that it's really become this thing where we're trying to get this need met. It's like, being thirsty and going into, a cake store. It's like, it's not going to, you're not going to get what you're looking for there.
I love metaphors so much. When, as you were saying that, what struck me is it's like being thirsty for cold water and picking up the water bottle that's been sitting in your hot car.
Ugh, yes.
That's what that feels like to me because this wanting a witness, this wanting to be seen, I can relate to that. But what I notice is, you were talking about brain science earlier. You get the dopamine hit, right? Someone likes your thing. You get that notification. You get that comment. Someone agrees with you or someone's like, this is amazing, right? You get that dopamine hit from like being seen and from the recognition. Right. But I'll speak from my own experience. Let me not project it onto others. What I'm really wanting is like connection with the person in real life. And in fact, no offense to any of you listening, I love you all dearly and appreciate you all. Yeah. But for people who I don't know personally, it's not deeply satisfying and fulfilling to me that you all like me. Right. Or that you all appreciate something. When someone I know and care about and is an important person in my life recognizes my work and honors what I do at it and respects and like sees me, that's a very different feeling than when a person I don't know and I've never met on the internet does. I'm not saying that it's invaluable, so I'm really not shitting on your love, people listening. Right. I think you get the distinction. And I'm sure other people experience it. What do you think of that? That like,
I think you're so right on. I think that, I do a lot of work with women around their values and what their values are and like for me, for example, freedom is a huge value for me. Fun and play is a huge value for me. Connection is a huge value for me. And so understanding what are the things that really fulfill those needs. And understanding that, going on social media, getting a like or sharing this or what have you, is that really fulfilling that particular value? Is that a way that you can honor that value? And so you might also have a value of recognition or a value of making an impact. And so maybe that's the value that's met when your listeners like it or comment or whatever, but not to mistake that for actual true human heart-to-heart connection with someone that knows not just what you're showing them on social media, but what they're, the whole picture, the big ugly tail that you have too, because we all have a big ugly tail too. So it means so much more to have someone love you when they've seen your big ugly tail than when they've seen your curated content.
100%. So I like this so much. from what you just said, I wrote down how your social media behavior reflects your values.
Yeah.
Or doesn't.
Right.
And literally divine timing. So I'm on day 6. I haven't written my post yet, but I've been feeling this dissatisfaction with social media. I want to say for like 2 years straight, because I remember more than that. It was December of 2015. I remember taking my first intentional break from social media. I think I took off the whole month of December. And so a little intermittently throughout the last couple of years, I've done it. Last year when I was traveling, I stopped. I didn't take off all of social media, but I stopped using my personal Facebook page for like 6 months.
Wow.
I stayed on Instagram though. But something I came to recently, and it's a different thing, like when you run a business, like something I say often is like, if I didn't have a business, I don't know that I would be on social media. But
yeah,
recently I was like, I need to check myself and deprogram my own, whether it's an addiction or whether it's a dependency on the likes, the follows, the comments, and all that stuff. So I started doing this 30-day writing devotional. Just knowing that like it's not gonna, I'm not doing the algorithm hack. I'm not doing like, I'm just gonna post what I want to post, and I'm gonna talk from my heart every single day for 30 days. And I'm gonna invite people to come along. So so here's what's funny. Yesterday, I made 2 posts. So like on any given, at this moment in time, I have 14.7 thousand followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
And yesterday, let's go to Saturday. Saturday, I made a post that had 149 likes. On Friday, my post had 357. Yesterday, 64.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm so glad that part of this practice for me is giving such less of a shit about like how many people are liking it, you know? Like what I'm actually caring about is the expression in the words and the people like having conversations, like reconnecting with my community and seeing how people are reflecting on what they're sharing. Because at the end of every prompt is, how do you feel about this? What's coming up for you? Maybe you want to write your own.
Right.
That's what I care about.
Yeah.
But I think that's been my intense dissatisfaction with social media, has been not being aligned with my values as I get on and as I am present on social media.
Yes. Well, and I think that social media, it's a playground for inner mean girls. It really is. So it's like the measurement to have such a quantifiable, how many likes, how many hearts, like to have that. I mean, inner mean girls love those measuring sticks. And then it's like you think, oh, as soon as I get 50,000 likes on my page, then I'm going to be cool. Then I'm going to be fine. And then you all of a sudden are like, well, actually, no, the bar's constantly going to be moving. We call it the achievement junkie inner mean girl archetype, right? She's the one that like, you're just about to cross the finish line and then she moves it another mile away and you're like, crap. So you never get the satisfaction of crossing the finish line.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's really painful. And I see it too in my daughters. You know, my daughter wants to have an Instagram account. She wants to have a YouTube account, all this stuff. And I'm like, no, we will be putting that off. If I post a picture of her, which I post all the time in my kids, with their permission, I've been like, hey, how do you feel about this? My oldest daughter's always like, as long as it helps someone, mommy, I'm good. I'm like, okay. So, I know, so sweet. So my daughter, right? Like I feel like, you know, I don't know. My philosophy of motherhood is that they're my daughters, but really they're the world's daughters. And I'm just the lucky one that gets to live with them and raise them.
I love that.
But she'll be like, how many likes did that picture get? And I'm like, wow, it starts so young. And I can't imagine going through puberty, you know, with social media being what it is. I mean, it's so crazy. And it's just so easy to dehumanize people and objectify people. It's so easy. And, you know, there's that Louis C.K. thing, which I know he's not our favorite person in the world anymore, but it's like that Louis C.K. thing when he has the thing about, you know, if you bully someone, if you say you're ugly to someone on social media, you don't get to see how that lands.
Yeah.
Like back in the day, it's like if you said you're ugly to someone, you got to see the reaction and then you would feel that reaction in your body and maybe get the message, I don't want to do that to people.
Yeah.
And that's missing when it comes to social media. And it's really scary. It's a crazy time to be parenting. I can tell you that much.
You know, this reminds me. So the other day, someone left a really weird comment on one of my posts, and I knew she was projecting her stuff all over me. And this is a woman in my community. I've met her. I know who she is. And I felt like I really needed to set a boundary and tell her that that wasn't an okay thing to say. And I knew that I knew how she would receive my comment. I knew she would take it hard. I was being kind and loving and compassionate, but I knew she would take it hard. But it was a boundary. She'd come up in my space. She'd said something inappropriate. It felt really shitty to receive. And I told her super lovingly, and she had the exact response I thought she would have. Yeah. But I checked myself. I read it over like 5 times before I posted it to make sure I was not being a bully on my own page. Because I think that's another thing. This is a really, really important point. The outer mean girl, like you're saying, right? How we can bully others in these spaces where we don't have to see their reaction.
Totally.
We don't even have to consider that they're going to have one.
Yeah. I mean, we completely dehumanize people.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, in the wonderful book, The 4 Agreements, it's like, be impeccable with your word. Mm-hmm. Would you say that to the person if they were sitting across from you? And if you wouldn't, don't post it. Yeah. Period. End of story. And I just feel like that's the thing that I strive, and it's such a work in progress, and I screw up all the time with that. But it's like, even when it comes to gossip or what have you, it's like, okay, would you say that? I don't care if it's a celebrity or if it's someone that you work with. Yeah. Would you say that if they were in the room? And if not, maybe don't say it.
That's been my rule for a really long time. Where I find I get in a little bit of trouble, which I imagine you can relate to this because I know you're also a very committed to truth-telling person, is that I would say a lot of things to someone's face that a lot of other people wouldn't. Again, though, with compassion and kindness, but I'm not going to pretend and I'm not going to lie.
Right. Absolutely. And there's the inner mean girl archetype called the good girl, and she's all about people pleasing and being polite and nice. That's a whole other inner mean girl archetype, my friends. So it's like, she wants you to do what's right, even if it's not right for you. Well, guess what? You don't need to go in with your good girl archetype either and post stuff on there or show up as that. I'm interested in authenticity. I'm interested in having your inner wisdom, which I love hearing for you. Before you posted that comment, you checked in with your inner wisdom before you posted that. You made sure that was coming out of love and kindness and fierceness, because we can have fierce love of like boundary, right? So it's there. And oftentimes we forget about the fierce part, but it's important. It's an important part of being a woman. It really is.
Big time. I love this. Thank you so much for sharing all these things about these archetypes. What are you working on right now that you're excited about? What's coming up?
Ooh, thank you for asking. I'm working on...
I don't usually ask people that question. I just want to know from you.
Well, right now I'm running this program. It's actually already in the world, but I'm running this program called Inner Wisdom Mastery, which is a 9-month program for a small circle of women. And it's a program I've been wanting to run for years, since my youngest was born, so 4 years ago. And what we're doing, I just think this is so interesting. It's fascinating. So every 4 weeks, we shift to a different area of our lives. So whether it's body or finances or relationships or what have you, and we ask our inner wisdom, what is it that you want from me in this area of my life?
Amazing.
And then we're actually in this small group of really amazing women holding each other accountable for acting on it.
Nice.
So by the end of these 9 months, by the end of 2018, these women are going to have made, absolute commitment, decisions, taken actions that are all from that space of inner wisdom. And it is we had a 3-day in-person retreat in San Francisco a couple weeks ago. And I honestly, Elizabeth, felt like it was the best work I've ever done. Like, I just felt like, wow, this is so powerful, because I'm so tired of people going like, here's the blueprint of the, like, it's like, you have your own blueprint.
You have your own blueprint.
And so to really be leading these women in between to that is so good. And then the other thing is, and I know you're doing this too, honey, it's like, I'm doing a lot more keynoting and work in the corporate space and really working to create positive women's culture in companies. And it's incredible. It's really amazing to do that work. I love it. I love helping women overcome self-bullying inside companies and really being able to see that difference for them rising into leadership. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So we're going to put links. Your website is amyahlers.com, right?
Yeah, That's perfect.
And we'll put links to everything else in the show notes. I'm pumped to take that archetype. Amy has 2 books, y'all. So if you have fallen in love with Amy, as I have over the last couple of months, go to her website, check out the books, check out her inner mean girl work. This is important. And I don't think anyone is above this at any level, right? Like you were saying, specifically, I like what you said in the beginning. When you are growing, and we have growth-oriented people listening to this or they wouldn't be here, when every time you take another step to grow, that's exactly when the inner mean girl will rear her head. Maybe in a new way, maybe in a new context, maybe you'll shift into a different archetype. But this is really important stuff. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for being willing to go there with me on things that are uncomfortable. Like we might have messed it up. We might get some emails from people that we did. And I always welcome that. You all know I'm going to listen. I'm going to take your feedback. So if we messed anything up here, if we said anything offensive, send an email. I would love to know so I could not do it again. But Amy, you're so great. I appreciate you. And thank you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Thank you for being a truth teller. You're incredible. I adore you.
You know what I wanted to tell them? Amy interviewed me on her podcast.
Yes.
And Amy asks amazing questions. And we had a conversation about body. I actually had an insight that I have never had before. I was able to articulate something on her show that I hadn't noticed before. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. So you can check out my interview on Amy's podcast. So.
Yes, we're incredible.
All right.
Loved it.
Thanks, Mama. We'll see you later.
Okay. Bye.